generous proposal. Are you in or are you out?
It's you who's out, Gobby. Out of your mind.
Wrong answer!
Hello there, true believers, and welcome to a brand new series on this channel, Tier Talk, a series where I go over franchises old and new and rating them based on my own personal preferences. These tier lists will cover everything from movies to cartoons to video games and book series, so strap in for some takes both searing hot and chilling cold. As always, if you find this video entertaining, let me know with a big ol' thumbs up and consider hitting the subscribe button for more content from the Northeast Kingdom's most base nerdy stuff lover. Without further ado, let's jump right into starting this video with today's topic of conversation: the amazing, the spectacular, some might even say stupendous, Spider-Man. Old fans of my channel may know that I'm a massive Spider-Man stan. I mean, what started this channel was stick figure animations based on my own interpretation of Spider-Man, with some not so subtle references to Sam Raimi's films and the spectacular Spidey cartoon. And I've been so entrenched in Spider-Man lore for the longest time, I figured it's about time to throw my definitive list of the webhead's big screen debuts for everyone to see and talk about. Just remember, this entire list and the things I'm about to say are my opinion, so if there's a part of this video where you agree or disagree, try not to roast me too hard in the comments. Or do, I don't really give a darn. Discussion is discussion. And with that, lads and ladies and everything in between, let's get into it. Okay, so kicking things off, we are going to talk about the Sam Raimi films first, and then we'll kind of just move on in the order that things kind of came out. Alright, so first things first, Sam Raimi Spider-Man 1. This thing is a goddamn classic, and there is not a lot you can say about that. Spider-Man 1 kind of brought superhero movies to the mainstream. I know that there were other movies that came out before, like the freaking Hulk and the Thor movies, and that Captain America movie that didn't take off a whole lot. But Spider-Man 1, Sam Raimi's film, introduced what superheroes could be and got people to the movie theaters. And I think that's a really important point to make out, is that without this kind of movie, without all of the practical effects that they put into it, and the fact that, yeah, there was some campy things, but there was also that sense of realism that the movies brought with it, these movies were important. That being said, there's a lot of really whack shit, and they killed Green Goblin in the first movie that he showed up in. They tried to do a redemption arc thing where they brought back, Harry Osborn in the third movie as the Goblin, which was fine, even though those events are supposed to happen the other way around. But this movie did a lot for superhero movie culture. It kind of like looks bad. It looks really dated now. Which, is to be expected. This is the first of its kind, and there are a lot of practical effects in this movie. And while those tend to look the best, it's also really easy to screw up CGI effects, which are also in this movie. I don't know if y'all remember the part where Norman Green Goblin vaporized all of the board for Oscorp, but that exists in this movie, and the skeletons are also in this movie. So while its legacy is really good, and it did a lot of things for mainstream superhero movie culture, I'm gonna go ahead and throw this right into the B tier, because it's a good movie, but there are still some things about it which I don't like. Alright, Spider-Man 2. You guys are gonna see this coming a miles away, but I'm gonna put this fucker in the S tier, okay? That's where we're going with this. This, in my humble opinion, is the best Spider-Man story. Now, we'll go into this more when this list is kind of finished, because there's another movie on here that I want to talk about. But this is the best Spider-Man story. Spider-Man in the comics is all about how many times can you get up after you've been knocked down, right? Everything about him is, I'm going to try my hardest, no matter what situation, no matter what befalls me as a person, as long as I am doing good, and as long as I spread goodness in this world, then everything evens itself out, right? And this movie exemplifies this. The whole story arc with Doc Ock, the whole MJ leaving him and then coming back sort of thing, all of that is exemplified in this movie. Spidey doubts himself, he kind of loses his powers because of some weird fucking reasons, but they come back and he ends up being the hero that he always knew he could be, and that the people around him didn't think he could be. And that's important for this movie. This is a really good Spider-Man story. All of the best Spider-Man stories are about Peter Parker going through shit and then coming back. That is the definition of Spider-Man. While also, everyman shit. Falling in love, falling out of love, going through hard times financially, watching the people around him distance themselves, some of them dying and stuff like that. All of that happens in this movie, and it's really fucking good. Also, Alfred Molina as Dr. Octopus, fucking spot on casting. I love everything about this movie. Again, the only way that this movie suffers is from some of the weird practical effects in this movie. Some of the weird CGI. The train scene is iconic, and when they try to rip Doc Ock's tentacles off, that's iconic, but there are some of the weird things that they do in this movie with the tentacles and the jumping around and the combat and everything that kind of hold this movie back. But again, because the core of this movie is the Spider-Man story, it's really fucking good, and you can pass off the other stuff as everything else. So, in my humble opinion, this is still the best Spider-Man story. It's not my favorite Spider-Man movie. There are others on this movie that I enjoy watching more, but this is still a goddamn good story. Spider-Man 3, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man 3 with the symbiote and the black suit and the fucking blonde, I can't even remember the actor's name. Eddie Brock in this movie. Oh god, there's so much to talk about. I don't think this is a bad movie. I think a lot of people when this movie came out thought it was a bad movie. And I think in hindsight, with, you know, the benefit of hindsight, people have become a little bit more easygoing on this movie. I think a lot of people see this movie for more of the artistic vision that Raimi was going for. And if it's not for the weird Venom subplot that fucking Avi Arad had to cram down everybody's throats with this movie, this could have been a really nice turnaround story. It could have been a really nice story about forgiveness and redemption. This is a really good movie. Again, I think there's a lot that holds it back, and again, product of its time. While I like the way the symbiote moves, and I like the whole flashy stuff that the symbiote becomes at the end of this movie, I think it still looks kind of bad. There's again, the whole rivalry thing between Peter and Eddie should have started, if not in Spider-Man 2, all the way back in Spider-Man 1. I hold that opinion that Eddie Brock and Peter need to have a long-lasting rivalry that shouldn't last just a single movie and then end in the same movie. Sam Raimi has a weird thing where he has to kill characters important to the whole mythos in every single one of his movies. I don't think that's the right call. Like, they killed Norman Osborn, and I know like he dies on and off sometimes in the comics, but in this world based on realism, you shouldn't just kill everybody that has importance to Peter and Spider-Man. Doc Ock dying at the end of this movie, while I think it's like deserved, honestly, like that completes his redemption in the end of the game in the movie. You need a level of consistency in your mythos, and every time you kill somebody, you ruin that, and you have to somehow shoehorn something in. So Sandman gets away in this movie with it, which I think is fine. Harry Osborn dies in this movie, which I think is fucking dumb. And Eddie Brock's symbiote both die in this movie, and that's so fucking stupid. So while there is a lot to love about this movie, the story told within is really good. There's some whack shit that happens that I can't really forgive this with, to the point where I'm just gonna throw it in the sea and call it a day. I think this movie is fine, and there are other better Spider-Man movies. Alright, now we're in the thick of it. We are talking about Andrew Garfield. I think No Way Home coming out has kind of made people see these movies in a better light, which is kind of strange, because when these movies came out, I thought people believed that they were good. I had this consensus that like these movies people actually liked, but then recently, or like before between No Way Home and TASM, nobody really liked these movies, which is kind of strange, because I thought the first one was good, and I thought people were really like geared up for this. Andrew Garfield is like a spot on casting for this character. I think Tobey Maguire fits the Peter Parker of this series really good. Andrew Garfield nails it as Spider-Man, dude. The tone that he gives, and the quips, and his physicality and everything, while there are a handful of practical stunts in these movies, he just does it better. And god damn, are we gonna talk about Emma Stone, Gwen Stacy, and the romance and everything in these movies? Is fantastic. That romance carried these movies so hard. You watch these movies to see the romance play out between Peter Parker and Gwen Stacy, and that's all you saw these movies for. The CGI is much better. You could definitely tell there was a bigger budget putting into making these movies look good. There's a lot of stylistic shots. First movie is kind of weird. The Lizard, I think the actor that played him was fantastic. Doc Connors, you can absolutely believe that he is a repentful scientist just trying to make the world better, will also be a better person, but he submits to his lust for power. He submits to the wanting to have himself cured. You know, that's the difference between Peter and Doc Connors, is that he gives into the pressure of wanting selfish needs, whereas Peter doesn't. So I think I think there's a lot to love about this movie. I don't think it reaches the heights of the others on this list, however. So for me, I'm gonna throw TASM 1 in the C tier. I think that this is a solid foundation, and if there were other things just tinged a little bit better, some of the dialogue is kind of whack. If there was, this is a solid foundation for what was to come. They could have made this franchise something better. Well, instead, they had to do the poopy bad thing, and they made this movie a piece of shit. I hate The Amazing Spider-Man 2. I hate it with a burning passion. This is everything that a Spider-Man movie shouldn't be. In the first movie, Andrew Garfield, Peter Parker, was in high school. I'm pretty sure he was like a sophomore or something. So you had a lot of time to develop this character, and a lot of time and effort you could build into making a series of movies that was worth a damn. But they didn't do that. In the second movie, he graduates high school. In the second movie, they introduce 4 of the Sinister Six characters in the same movie, with only 2 of them being shunted in the spotlight because this movie still had to have a central villain, Electro. Harry Osborn's Green Goblin was such a forced take in this movie, did not need to happen. And they introduced the Rhino at the end of the movie when they gave Alexei like the very smallest minute amount of vengeance he needed to go against Spider-Man in the beginning. Like, he's literally in the opening bit for like the first 10 minutes of the movie, and then they turn him into a supervillain in the last 10 minutes, and then they don't even show his defeat they show his defeat off screen. Harry Osborn in this movie, so forced. I don't know why they had the feeling to fumble this so hard when in the first 3 Tobey Maguire movies they showed you how to build a relationship between characters. In this movie, he just kind of shows up and ducks out in the same movie after the movie has to tell you that they're best friends. That's not okay. Their relationship was built off screen, and his name is Harry Osborn, so you're supposed to care when bad things happen to him. Also, I just want to point out that the Norman Osborn, the Osborn virus thing or whatever, the genetic defect that's in the Osborn legacy or whatever, didn't actually attack his father, Norman, until he was like middle-aged. He's in like his 50s and 60s. He has the virus attacking him. Whereas like Harry Osborn in this movie, it literally doesn't show up in his entire life at all until he goes to see his father, and then it just aggressively attacks him to the point where it's physically debilitating for him as like a 20-year-old guy. What the fuck kind of logic is that? There's no consistency in that whatsoever. Also, they did my boy Jamie Foxx really bad with the whole hair and do. I won't elaborate on that. You guys have seen him both in this movie and in No Way Home. You know what I'm talking about. Only things about this movie that are fucking great are the suit. This is probably the most accurate depiction of a Spider-Man suit and rocks so hard. I love this suit to death. And then the romance between Emma and Peter just flourished in this movie. It was so good. It was the rocky road stuff that Peter always has. He has something good as you throw it away and then he wants it back again. There's just so much about that dynamic that I appreciate. It's basically the only thing in this movie that I like. Sure, it's pretty, and the final fight between Electro and Peter's fucking badass, but they killed Electro. They killed Electro! So right there, it's gonna stay in the F tier. It's where it's gonna stay for fucking all ends of time, unless somehow magically there's an Amazing Spider-Man 3 that retroactively makes that movie good. I don't think that's ever gonna happen, and in fact, doing so is gonna take a work of God, so I don't think it's gonna happen. Alright, Spider-Man Homecoming. We are now in Mr. Tom Holland's foray into the Spider-Verse. We are loving this movie. I don't think there was enough praise for this movie. I think people see this one and they're like, oh, there's no consequences, it's just a shitty little peeper. Let me tell you something. This is a B-tier movie. This is a B-tier movie. This is a fantastic outing for the first time since The Amazing Spider-Man. Like, this movie makes this movie look like child's play, okay? I know it's a part of the MCU. I know that there is a lot when it comes to Tony Stark in this movie. I agree that it is a heavy load to bear, and that all of Spider-Man seems to fight in this series, this franchise, is ex-Stark employees. I think that's going to change, and we'll talk about it when I get to No Way Home, because this movie retroactively makes these movies better, right? Vulture's motivation and characterization in this movie is fantastic. The villain twist where he shows up and he is Liz Allen's fucking dad, fantastic plot reveal. I think that Tom Holland just nails it. Tom Holland nails the atmosphere of him as a kid wanting to be a superhero, but always getting forced to realize that, hey, being a superhero is tough, and being an adult is a hard thing to do. It's not all sunshine and rainbows. You don't just web up the enemies and it's all done. There are consequences, and that is displayed in this movie. He wants to go to homecoming, he wants to have a girlfriend, he wants to have a high school life, but he also wants to be important to somebody like Tony Stark. He wants to be a hero, but that doesn't come easily to him at all in this movie. I don't know what people are thinking when they say, hey, this movie is bad because Peter doesn't have consequences. Alright, next on this list, we got Spider-Man Far From Home. Okay, this one is just ever so slightly crazier than the first one. The stakes are higher. The action is a lot better. They did a lot of more practical stunts in this movie. I don't know if you guys saw the behind the scenes or whatever, but Tom Holland gets fucking dunked on so many times in the stunt rigging in this movie. It's insane. I like this movie for a couple of reasons. First reason is Jake Gyllenhaal's Mysterio. It's a pretty great interpretation of the character. You know, we always saw him as like this goofy, off-putting stagehand kind of character in comics and in the comic book media. This version of Mysterio shows us a vengeful side, a side of a person who is actually wronged and wants compensation for being wronged that way. Even if he is a little overdramatic or whatever, that's the nature of Quentin Beck as a character. So I thought his interpretation of Mysterio is really good. This is the first movie where we actually see Peter Parker go through some shit. He actually has feelings for another person. It's a little bit stronger than like a high school crush, you know, like he wants to get to know somebody a little bit more. He wants to confess feelings and everything. This movie shows us the evolution of Peter Parker Spider-Man. This is the first movie that happens after Endgame, and it's really apparent. Tony Stark being gone from his universe, it shows it very much that this character doesn't have the guidance that he was supposed to have. When people say that these three movies, Peter doesn't really have like the consequence inflicted to him, obviously the most consequence happens in No Way Home, but this movie is all about follow the leader. He wants to be a hero. He wants. And in this movie, he is a hero, right? In this movie, he is Spider-Man. He's recruited by S.H.I.E.L.D. He has all of these ties, but now he wants to be a kid again. It's this back and forth where this is the hero wanting movie, this is the normal life wanting movie, and he hasn't found that balance yet. He hasn't figured it out yet. So I don't know, when it comes to the characterization of Peter, I don't know. I don't know. This movie is hard for me to fight for. This movie is also hard for me to fight against, because I could see both sides of the same coin. I will throw this movie in the C tier, just under Homecoming, and the reason I'll throw it in the C tier is because he almost actually kills a bus full of kids with a military grade drone. That's it. That's the deciding factor. He almost gets people killed in this movie, and he did it. Whether he knew it was going to happen or not, that's still something that he did. So, all right, now we're talking No Way Home. Oh, this movie is so good. Oh, this movie is so good. This is my favorite Spider-Man movie. I'm putting this in S tier. This is my favorite Spider-Man movie, okay? This is the best Spider-Man story. This is my favorite Spider-Man movie. All right, you guys see the difference here? This is nostalgic pandering for all of the last 10-15 years of movies, okay? It brings back villains from both eras, it brings back both Spider-Man, and it somehow manages to keep a narrative cohesion for Tom Holland's Spider-Man. There is consequence in this movie. There's the great power, great responsibility speech in this movie. Willem Dafoe steals the show as probably the toughest villain that Tom Holland's Peter Parker has faced to date. And it says a lot about his character, where he can actually bring that version of Goblin to his knees. Almost replicates the same scenario that happens in Tobey Maguire's outing as Spider-Man, even though this was a little bit more on purpose and this was definitely an accident, half accident, whatever you want to call it. A lot of important things happen to Tom Holland's Spider-Man in this universe, and I think it's going to mean just a better movie series going forward. Now, obviously, we haven't heard about anything that's going to happen after this movie because of the writer's strike and everything like that, so I can't exactly speak to the future of this confidently. However, I will say that Tom Holland's Peter being in a dingy apartment in the middle of Manhattan, it sets up for some really good stories going forward. I can't wait to see where they go after this. Again, this is just my favorite Spider-Man movie to date. Alright, now we get to talk about the shit ones. Venom? C tier. Okay, let me explain something to you guys. Venom and Eddie Brock are the other side of the Peter Parker Spider-Man coin. They are a literal duality. Their characters should always reflect one another. Venom is the ugly reflection of the heroic Spider-Man. So the fact that they decided to greenlight a Venom movie with a symbiote that has nothing to do with Spider-Man, what the fuck are they doing over there? Don't get me wrong, okay? Don't get me wrong. I fucking love Tom Hardy's impersonation of Eddie Brock in this movie, and I think the little kooky, weird buddy cop duality thing that they got going on between just these two characters alone is really good. But almost all of this movie is a crazy, weird CGI slugfest. There's nothing about this movie that screams personal, okay? It just really is Eddie Brock losing all of the shit in his life because he wants to pursue the right thing, losing all of it, and then somehow getting Venom makes up for it. I don't understand. He doesn't gain anything in this movie. The story is literally just watch a man fall and then stay in the shit slump, and then he gets magical alien powers. That's so fucking crazy to me. We also get a bunch of nods to the other symbiotes that made canonical, impactful appearances in this movie, but I don't think they're really good. I don't think this movie is really good. It's a weird first step, and there could be better things down the pipeline, but again, just with what we got out of these two movies, and then the trailer for the recent Kraven movie, I will talk about that when I talk about that. I don't think this Sonyverse thing is going to be all that great. I don't think it is. Let There Be Carnage. Alright, I like this movie. I know with all the harsh things that I just said about Venom, why would I like a literal CGI slugfest in the movie, in the sequel? And I'll tell you why. For one, I think the buddy copness of this movie is just a lot better. I think they actually were able to iron out a proper relationship between Eddie and his symbiote Venom in this movie. It goes a long way in carrying what is bad about this movie. What is bad about this movie? Well, for one, the fucking weird relationship thing that Woody Harrelson's Cletus Cassidy is trying to say that he has with Tom Hardy's Eddie Brock. That's so strange, this weird like brotherhood kinship thing that they're trying to tell about those two. Here's like the truth about Eddie Brock and Cletus Cassidy, right? They have absolutely nothing in fucking common at all in the comics. They're absolutely nothing. Cletus scares Eddie Brock. He's a serial killer. He's supposed to be this crazy, unpredictable guy, and the only reason that they know each other is because they shared or were close in a cell after Eddie Brock became Venom. And then Cletus gets his symbiote and breaks out all by himself, right? I do like Woody Harrelson's interpretation of Cletus. It makes him seem a little bit more grounded. Like, I know we have to characterize things in cartoons and stuff because they're made for kids, but this makes it seem like an actual unpredictable serial killer in real life got a symbiote. That's where I could give it credit. Also, the fact that he's red this time and not the weird dark green color that Riot was at the end of this movie makes for this fight between these two a lot more impressive. It's visually fun to look at. But a dark green blob fighting a black blob isn't fucking fun to look at. So this final fight in the church with the fires and the white decor and everything, it just looked better. It was just more fun to watch. So I can really appreciate this movie, whereas I couldn't really give a toss about the first Venom movie. Mind you, I don't believe either one of them is really that great. In fact, I'm kind of considering just moving each of these down a tier because I think that fits it a little bit more. I don't think Let There Be Carnage is on the same tier as Homecoming and the first Spider-Man movie, but it's definitely not bottom of the barrel when compared to The Amazing Spider-Man 2. But you know what is? Fucking Morbius. Who thought this was a good idea? Who thought that greenlighting a Morbius movie was a fucking good idea? Jared Leto is fucking strange on his own, and I don't know how he's still in Hollywood and still getting jobs. But the fact that they put him in this position in the first place is just so strange to me. Morbius is another one of those Spider-Man characters where you really need Peter Parker in order to make his character matter. Michael Morbius is exactly like Doc Connors. He's a guy who has something wrong with him, but he has the brains in order to cure it. But when he does it and he fucks things up because he did it selfishly, he needs somebody like Peter to be the side of his coin. He needs somebody morally that is able to ground him, and I don't think we got that in this movie. There's just a lot of really weird, dark, slimy CGI scenes where Morbius is tearing shit up because, of course, a scary vampire tears shit up. People die unnecessarily in this movie. There's a lot of weird camp when it comes to like, oh, this is a comic book movie, so the characters have to do comic book stuff. I can't even tell you half of the characters cast or who they were supposed to be in this movie because I actually checked out before like the 20-minute mark. I tried very hard to care about this movie. I only care slightly more about The Amazing Spider-Man 2 because it's actually about Spider-Man. But Jared Leto's Morbius in this movie just does not fucking work at all. What's really funny though is that this was actually able to get itself memed back into theaters, which I thought was fucking hilarious. I can't tell if the board or whatever was just like, yeah, we lost a chunk of money with this movie, but people seem to be talking about it online, so we'll re-release the movie just for the meme, just to go down in history as we lost a shit ton of money. I can't tell if that was actually a joke or not, but this movie fucking sucks, and I really hope it's the last time we see this version of the character on the big screen. Alright, are we ready to talk about good movies now? Because god damn. Alright, Into the Spider-Verse and Across the Spider-Verse are fucking phenomenal movies. They are like peak animation fiction, okay? Each one of these is a love letter to the character that is Spider-Man. I don't think there's a single person on the face of the earth who was actually upset when these movies were announced. I'm glad that Miles is getting his time in the spotlight and everything because he certainly believes to be as such. I can't wait for him to get a live action interpretation because that would just absolutely blow everybody out of the water. But I think it's really important that these movies are coming out and people are seeing these characters and are identifying with how they behave and the way that they grow, and just the way that they're presented is really special for a lot of people, and I think that's important. I think that's important. Into the Spider-Verse is a fantastic warp on the origin story. It pays homage to Miles' actual origin in the comic books, which is, you know, Peter Parker dying and then Miles having powers when he died and not being able to do a whole lot about it because, again, he's just a scared little kid. Miles, I think, is bit by his spider when he's in middle school. I think this dude is like an 8th grader when he's bit. So it's actually pretty cool that we see him enrolled in Vision's Academy when he's a high schooler. So he's aged up just a little bit to make it more believable that he's a guy, but he's still obviously a kid and the youngest Spider-Man. With all that being said, the art, the animation, everything about this movie, the soundtrack, oh my god, the soundtrack. Hats off to the composers and the creators of the soundtracks in these movies. This is some of the most fantastic music I've ever heard in a movie. And when you walk down the street and you hear somebody bumping these songs in these cars, either Sunflower or Self-Love or whatever in these movies, you know that guy's a Spider-Man fan. I'm going to go ahead and throw this one in the B tier because I think this is a good Spider-Man story. I'll go over this difference here soon because I have a little bit to say about Across the Spider-Verse. Across the Spider-Verse is better than Into the Spider-Verse. I'm just going to say that now and get that out of the way, okay? This is how this is supposed to go, right? The only reason I don't have this on an S tier is because I don't think this story any longer, with the conclusion of part 1 of this 2-part finale series, this movie and this franchise is no longer about Miles Morales. Now, I know that sounds like a hot take. That is definitely a steamy hot take, but this movie is not about Miles anymore. This is now about the greater picture and how this Miles is changing the lives of the people around him. I know there was a really big emotional through line with how one person is supposed to be able to wear the mask, what they can give up, what they can't, how they should be, how they shouldn't be. just being themselves in this is this movie's message, right? This movie is about Miles being himself in spite of the people around him and the way that they act as spider people. Being Spider-Man, anybody can put on the mask, right? That's what Stan Lee said. Anybody can put on the mask. But what's important is how this Miles wasn't supposed to have the mask in the first place. This Miles was just supposed to be completely unaffected by being a Spider-Man, but now he is. And so this story has to evolve from being a story about Miles to being a story about how he is reflected in everybody else's eyes. Miguel O'Hara sees him as a problem, sees him as the anomaly, the source of everything bad, right? Gwen sees him as somebody she can confide in, as somebody who knows how she feels, and somebody that she respects dearly. Peter B. Parker wants Mayday to grow up to be like Miles because he thinks he's such a fucking good person. But this movie isn't about a straightforward Miles story anymore. It's not about how Miles feels being Spider-Man. It's not about the things that Miles has to sacrifice to be Spider-Man. It's a story about how everybody else is interpreting Miles. The reflections and the ripples that he's making through the multiverse. That is what this movie is about. And that is what this franchise will continue to be about. It's not going to be a personal growth story anymore. It's going to be a story about how Miles is seen throughout the entirety of the multiverse. And this is, and I want to, we'll make this direct comparison because they're right here, right? This is a story all about Peter Parker and Spider-Man and the things that he gives up and the lives that he touches and changes and then the growth he makes as a person. This is not that. Across the Spider-Verse is Miles making everybody else's life different just because he exists. I hope I'm getting that across clearly. I hope that I'm trying to make this a little bit like you can comprehend what I'm trying to say. This is Into the Spider-Verse is a story wholly about Miles and the things that he's willing to give up. This is a story about how Miles is reflecting in everybody else's lives. And I think that's an important difference. I think that's important to note here. When you talk about these two movies, the only reason I rate Across the Spider-Verse higher on this scale here is because of the sheer amount of preparation and effort that took into making this movie so fucking awesome to look at. Everything about this movie shines. There's more animation styles. There's more attention to detail. There's a deeper story being told because now you have to include a boatload of more characters. It comes across well in the symbolism. I love the artistic expression in each of these people's worlds. The dark and gloomy anti-Miles with the purple and the green. Gwen's pastel colors, the watercolor world and the art expression when she's breaking down and when she's exploring stuff in her world. Crazy ass neon, super clean, angular stuff that happens in Miguel's world. The super insane. You know what my favorite part of this movie is? My favorite part of this whole movie, it's not the crazy chase scene. It's not the medieval vulture in the beginning. It's the adventure to Mumbattan. Spider-Man India is probably my favorite thing about this movie. Just the way that he acts, the way he behaves, and then the themes, the leitmotifs, and the music in that area. Everything about that is crazy to me. I would love a movie that just sets aside and does a Mumbattan movie. I think that's fantastic. That would be an excellent spin-off. You could do a series about that if you wanted to. But anyway, everything about this movie rocks. It's a step up in every way from Into the Spider-Verse. I think the only thing that was lost was that it doesn't feel personal about Miles anymore. Like, yeah, we get the scene where he says, oh, I'm gonna do my own thing, and that's important. That's important for this character, but just as important, there was a movie and a moment in this movie about Miles. There was also a moment like that for Gwen. There was also a moment like that for Peter B. Parker. There was also a moment like that for Miguel O'Hara. There's important moments like that throughout the entirety of this movie. It's not just about Miles anymore. I think the third part that comes out next year is going to be crazy. It's going to make this movie look even better. I think that's truly what I think. When Beyond the Spider-Verse comes out, I imagine that this is going to come up into the S tier as this amazing setup movie. Everything was done in hindsight, and it will be better than Beyond the Spider-Verse. That's my prediction, and that's how I'm going to cap off this video. Woo! Okay, we did it. there's a little bit more cohesion for you. I'll just kind of stand back here and let y'all see. This is my definitive Spider-Man movie tier list for right now, until Beyond the Spider-Verse comes out, and then maybe I'll watch all the movies again or something, just so that way I can be a little bit more fresh in mind. Excuse me. So that way I could be a little bit more fresh in mind come next year. We'll see how it goes. But thank you everybody so much for watching. I appreciate each and every single one of you. If you agreed or disagreed with moments in my list, please let me know in the comments below. I'd love to have a discussion with you. And until next time, I'll see you in the next video. Excelsior!